Hello, my name is Andrew Thake, Divisional Director for Resourcing Tomorrow. Delighted to be joined today by Jonathon Leader, who heads up investor research for Resourcing Tomorrow. So delighted to have you with us today, Jonathon.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, Andrew. Pleasure's all mine. Excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Jonathon, what is the market like currently for investors looking at mining stocks?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think there's any doubt that it's been a relatively challenging year for mining stocks generally, and I think that carries on a trend from 2022 through to 2023. I do think that a particularly challenging part of our story is the majors as far as an investment proposition goes. I mean, certainly operational performance, improved ESG protocols, all of that is positive on the major side, but I do think from an investor, it's difficult to see those margins delivering great value currently. However, from what our investor partners and analysts have been telling me, there is a lot of cause for optimism in certain sectors. I mean, generally speaking, commodity prices by historical standards are performing relatively highly across the board. I think there are some stories that we should be paying attention to, particularly for investors in the critical minerals space. So lithium, as we all know, it hit a rather dizzying height of $70,000 per ton earlier on in 2023. That now has come down to roughly around 27,500. Obviously, it might hover sort of in and around that on a day-by-day basis. But I think that's reflecting a lot more accurate value for investors out there. I do think some of the mining stocks in lithium maybe got a little bit overheated, and a lot of investors found it difficult to see the margins. Having said that, I think they're much more accurately reflected now at where they are. So certainly a story to be paying attention to. Precious metals also, generally speaking, they've outperformed the rest of the market. There's a healthy amount of liquidity in that space. There's a lot of M&A activity going on there as well. I think the other two big stories to look out for, though, is copper. If you have a long-term investment horizon, you're not looking at this as a sort of 2 to 5 year play, you're looking more of a 10 to 15 year play. The demand for copper is only going to rise for a whole host of reasons we'll go into a bit more depth in the rest of the interview. But the energy transition and copper's use cases there go well beyond EV batteries. Let's put it that way. So copper supply is a big concern. There's a lot of value to be found there. And elsewhere, by the way, some very well-informed market players are very bullish around tin as well, which is maybe a slightly less sexy story going on. But yeah, keep your eye on the tin, so to speak.
Yeah, there's always, it's sometimes the case of the less illustrious sort of commodities, often where there's often the really greatest long-term value. But you touched on a number of areas there, lithium and copper and areas around the energy transition. Your job is doing day-to-day research, speaking and meeting with investors, both here based in London and also globally as well. What particular trends, can you pick out in the energy transition? I know you talked about copper, maybe we could go and actually start there. Where are particular investors looking at? Are they looking at investing into copper producers? Are they looking for the next tier one copper miners? Or are they looking for other opportunities?
Yeah, it's a mixed story. It's a mixed story on copper. I think it's probably one of the more interesting elements of that energy transition conversation that we're having. It typically tends to center around lithium and nickel. I do think copper has a massive role to play. As far as where investors are looking for the opportunities, like I mentioned before, the majors across the board, don't get me wrong, there's certainly value to be found there for a particularly sophisticated and nuanced player with the right kind of investment horizon. So I'm by no means telling people to completely stay away from that market. But copper exploration companies with a line of sight to production within the next 2 to 5 years, that's the hot story. I think that's where people really want to look. As far as operational jurisdictions, the big names, we all sort of know them already. A lot of places in Latin America with giant copper stores, etc., etc. There is some concerns around resource nationalism risk, and we'll talk a bit about that as we go a little further on into the interview. But there's certainly a lot of value to be found there. The big trends, however, though, is when you look across the board with critical mineral stocks. So again, whether that be lithium, copper, nickel, silver, manganese, caesium, graphite, cobalt, you name it. The macroeconomic trends supporting those commodities are too strong to ignore. And again, I'm probably not telling anyone who's watching this interview anything they don't already know, but the fact is, the way the world is viewing the way we produce, store, and generate energy are fundamentally changing. Those trends are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. And so the value for those companies and the way they are going to be embedded into our global energy economy that goes well beyond sort of base metals ever did, you cannot ignore it. So I would strongly advise people keeping a very, very close eye on that sector. We've got plenty of those producing and exploration companies who are going to be joining us at resourcing tomorrow, later on this year in November. So I'm excited to meet those producers and have some conversations with them. I know that a lot of the investors I'm speaking to, particularly those based in Europe and the UK, have the exact same attitude. They're the big stories everybody sort of wants to pay attention to and keep their ear to the ground on, so to speak. Elsewhere though, like I mentioned earlier, precious and gold, there's, they still represent an attractive opportunity as a value store against the US dollar. And for deep value investors in particular, there's a lot of, so the perception certainly is from the market, as far as I can gather, there is a fair amount of undervalued precious metals stocks, and particularly in gold and silver. So if you can find those diamonds in the rough, recognize and identify those undervalued stocks who are going to turn at some point as we get further and further into this cycle, then there's value to be had, but it's not for the faint-hearted.
But shouldn't investors just go and wait until the mining stocks go up in value?
Well, I mean, listen, I think it all depends on risk profile, doesn't it? And, to take words out of the mouths of one of the most successful certainly mining investors full stop, but particularly in precious and metals. If you look at Rick Rule, he always says buy at the bottom. The risk there obviously is if you buy at the bottom and it never reaches the peak, then it's sort of a slightly wasted exercise. If, however, again, you have the nuance and the sophistication to identify where those undervalued stocks are and where the actual economics surrounding that company are much stronger than their stock price might suggest, for whatever reason, then buy at the bottom and ride the wave to the top. That's the difference between sort of 100,000-aires and millionaires and billionaires, so to speak. It's the people who are able to spot. And again, it's a famous story. Amazon started in the back of Jeff Bezos's basement or something, or his garage, whatever it might have been. Look at where that company is today. I think there's a lot of mining exploration companies out there who may have a similar story moving forward.
Mm-hmm. You run the investor engagement team for Resourcing Tomorrow, which is again taking place this November, the 28th to the 30th of November. For those that are new to Resourcing Tomorrow or haven't come to the event before, how does Resourcing Tomorrow help investors?
I mean, listen, this is the one-stop shop for all of your mining finance needs here. I'm really, really excited about this event. A lot of the investors I'm speaking to are as well. If you were to summarize it, you would really put it down to three things. You've got one, you have an absolutely, and particularly now, where we have a relatively soft retail market from where we might have been maybe this time last year or even 2 or 3 years ago. That retail money is starting to dry up just due to the challenging economy that we're all operating in, right? Inflation, interest rates, everybody's feeling it. So what this is doing is giving investors an opportunity, and indeed the junior mining companies as well, and the majors, an opportunity to sit in front of each other, to have those business critical conversations and originate deals, if not closing them out. This is a critical capital raising platform that the junior miners desperately need, and for the right investors who are willing and able to deploy capital into the mining space, it represents a significant opportunity for them. The fact is, if you're in the UK and Europe, you're not going to be able to meet as many high quality junior mining companies across commodities and across project stages. Whatever your taste is, if you like full-blown major producers, we've got them there. If you're looking for junior sort of early stage exploration companies with a little bit more of a spicy risk appetite, so to speak, we have them for you as well. The second stage of this obviously is the content you're going to get on stage. I mean, you know better than I do, Andrew. We have some of the world-leading industry thought leaders speaking at this conference. We've got C-level representation, highly senior level representation from, I think it's 6 or 7 of the top 10 major mining companies in the world. We've got representative of some of the largest mining jurisdictions as far as on a governmental level. So there's an enormous amount of sort of analysis and high-level strategic conversation that you're going to be here by the people who are sitting right at the top of the industry, who are going to allow you to build your capital deployment and capital raising strategies moving forward. And the third one is our mining spotlights and our mining pitch battles. So these are specifically in the junior exploration space, or these junior exploration or development space. And what we essentially have is you're going to be hearing 10 to 15 minute pitches from all of these companies, laying out the most recent news, any feasibility studies they've recently done, laying out the base economics of their projects and how they're going to be moving forward. If you're an investor in that space, you want to be sat there listening to those senior management teams, asking them the difficult questions. Most importantly, if you're going to be if you're listening to this and you're going to be attending the event, don't just sit there in the audience quiet as a dormouse. You have questions for these senior management teams, put them to them, put them under a little bit of pressure and see how they respond. That's how you're going to be able to separate out the real opportunity from the lacking ones. And the final ones, and this is really, who doesn't, if you've watched Dragon's Den, if you've watched, I forget the American equivalent's name for a second. Pardon?
Shark's Tank.
Shark's Tank even. We've got our mining pitch battles. So this is where you're going to see, for the grand prize, and we should stress, a hypothetical £1 million, you're going to see some of the top senior management teams in their various commodity spaces, whether it be precious metals, critical minerals, so on and so forth, going head to head, laying out their investment proposition to a panel of judges made up of very senior, very experienced, sophisticated investors, and those investors are going to give them feedback. If you're in the audience for that one, you're going to get a very entertaining session. More so though, you're going to get an insight into what investors want to hear when you're talking to them and delivering your pitch, whether it be in stage or in a closed door meeting, wherever that interaction might be. You're going to get a head start on what questions are investors asking and what do they really want to hear from issuers when they're trying to access that capital.
Yeah. One area I think I'm just kind of keen to ask you about is you've done some really great work in expanding our investor network. I know you and I sometimes call them the new investors, but can you just talk briefly, I guess, a bit about the work you've done, in two of the areas, one in encouraging more OEMs and car manufacturers to attend, and the other in terms of the work that you're doing to encourage more ESG investors and impact funds to attend?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, let's sort of set the macroeconomic stage, so to speak, before we sort of go into the details of what we've been doing. So what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years is a movement upstream of traditional downstream players. Most notably are the automotive OEMs. So these are the BMWs of the world, the Mercedes of the world, the Teslas of the world. We've seen very public facing statements from the likes of Elon Musk. If anybody can source me X amount of silver, then I'll make you a billionaire, and so on and so forth. So what we're essentially trying to do here is build a bridge between auto manufacturers who are engaging in mining via what's called offtake. Again, if you're a well-experienced sort of miner involved in the space, you don't need me to tell you what offtake is, because offtake in and of itself is not new, of course. That's how the commodity traders and so forth have always been working, is via offtake. So offtake isn't new. What is new is the market participants therein. So all of a sudden, whereas previously a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW, in order to secure their supply of metals, whether that be sort of traditional industrial metals like steel or copper, now obviously with the advent of electric vehicles, that's moving much more onto the lithiums of the world, the nickels of the world, silver, manganese, you name it, you sort of need it for an EV battery. In order to secure their supply of those metals, they are now developing direct relationships with the mining organizations and doing the deals directly. So what we're trying to do is solidify that link and build a bridge between those two sectors. In order to do that, obviously, I don't want to sort of go into anything sort of too confidential or mention specific names, but we're building relationships with some of the key sort of industry associations in those spaces. We're in advanced conversations with them about how we can get more OEMs along to the show, and also, educating our mining partners as well as how do you develop messaging and how do you develop communication strategies that really speak to that part of the market, because a lot of those auto OEM folk, they obviously know a great deal about cars, as you would hope they would, they're not mining experts by any stretch of the imagination. This is a trend that's really only been around for the last 2 or 3 years. So they're still getting their heads around how to fully engage and derive value from that, from this sector as well. On the other side of ESG, it's an educational piece. I think encouragingly, and what has certainly been encouraging to me since I joined the Beacon team, is how seriously many of our mining partners genuinely take this issue. They want to perform better, both operationally, whether it be in terms of their water usage, whether it be in terms of the way they're engaging with local communities, and particularly indigenous communities in different parts of the world, like Australia, for example, as well as obviously, the more sort of basic ones like their carbon emissions and so forth. Not only do they want to operate in a way that leaves less of a footprint, but they also want to be able to report, manage, collect, and communicate that data a lot more clearly. So what we're doing is essentially leading a research project where we're talking to as many ESG funds as we can do. We're trying to understand what questions are they going to be asking our senior management teams from the mining corporates. And again, building that bridge a little bit closer, letting our mining partners know not only what they need to do in substance, which is the most important thing. We shouldn't allow ourselves to be distracted from that fact. The operations are the single most important thing, but certainly the way they're communicating and capturing those data points and talking to investors about it is very, very important. And through that engagement with those ESG funds, we're able to tell them the mining story as well. The fact that if we want to pursue a just and equitable energy transition globally, we need more lithium, we need more nickel, we need more cobalt, we need more graphite. How do we explore for and produce those metals in the most environmentally sustainable way, as well as using those metals further on downstream to create things like lithium-ion batteries that we need to power our electric vehicles and so forth?
Mm-hmm. And just time for one last question. If I am an investor and I'm keen to go and sign up, what's that website and how do I sign up?
Absolutely. So listen, this is a perfectly simple, well, actually, firstly, I should say, listen, if you want to reach out to me directly and have a conversation about how you can get involved in the event on maybe a more structural and deeper level, then we welcome that. Just send me over an email. It's jonathon.leader@mindsandmoney.co.uk. I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you. If, however, you just want to register the event, pop along as an attendee, enjoy the networking opportunities and content that we have there for you, just go straight over to resourcingtomorrow.com. We've got an investor pass there for you that is free of charge. What I should mention, though, to all our investors watching out there, it's free of charge on a monetary basis, but we do expect you to be meeting those mining corporates in return for that privilege. So make sure you're making the most out of that networking opportunity, going on our meeting planner, arranging those meetings and sitting down with those senior management teams to explore those opportunities.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Jonathon. Once again, would remind any investors who are interested, you can go and come to our website, resourcingtomorrow.com, for further details. Look forward to seeing you on the 28th to 30th of November. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.
Resourcing Tomorrow, accelerating the energy transition. 100 plus countries represented. And together with government representatives, mining and energy professionals, ESG experts, financial and professional services, industry associations, investors, and consultants, Resourcing Tomorrow will address critical mineral supply, the energy transition, environmental resilience, the circular economy, ESG, our future workforce, AI automation and machine learning, digitalization, mineral processing and plant optimization, exploration and development projects. Have your say in the future of our industry. Join us for Resourcing Tomorrow from 28 to 30 November 2023. Register today